The clock on the wall ticked monotonously, echoing through the empty apartment like a heartbeat that refused to slow. Daniel sat in the worn leather chair by the window, staring out at the city streets below. The autumn wind swirled leaves along the sidewalks, but he barely noticed. His mind was consumed with thoughts of what was about to happen. Today she was coming. Emily, his wife, the woman he had once promised to love forever. And now she was coming to finalize their divorce. He ran a hand through his hair and exhaled sharply, the anxiety twisting in his chest like a knot that refused to loosen. It had been months since their fights had escalated into irreparable damage. Months since the laughter in their home had been replaced by cold silences and doors slamming shut. Yet despite it all, he had hoped against reason that maybe today would bring some closure, some peace. He had imagined the scene countless times in his head. A polite handshake, a few curt words, and the signing of papers that would finally end this chapter. But the reality, as always, had a way of twisting his expectations into something unrecognizable. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, making him jump as though the sound had come from inside his chest. He straightened in his chair, trying to steady his racing heart. "Here goes nothing," he muttered under his breath, standing to open the door. And there she was, Emily, standing in the doorway, wearing a coat that was too heavy for the mild autumn weather, and a scarf loosely wrapped around her neck. But it wasn't her coat or scarf that stole his breath. It was the unmistakable curve of her belly, round and full beneath the soft fabric of her sweater. 7 months pregnant. Daniel's mind faltered, his carefully constructed composure crumbling in an instant. He froze, his hand on the door handle, staring at her as if the world had suddenly shifted on its axis. Emily's eyes met his, calm and resolute, but tinged with a softness that seemed to reach for him across the space that had grown between them over the past year. "Daniel," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "We need to talk." He stepped back, gesturing for her to enter, though his hands trembled slightly. They moved to the living room, and she sat gracefully on the couch, placing her hands protectively on her belly. Daniel, meanwhile, felt rooted to the spot, unable to sit, unable to speak, unable to reconcile the woman he had once known with the image before him. For months he had imagined her leaving without a word, imagining her as someone he had lost forever. Yet here she was, carrying a piece of him that he hadn't known existed until now. A tiny life that had formed quietly, a secret kept until the moment it mattered most. He felt an ache unlike any he had known, a mix of fear, wonder, and a sudden, overwhelming responsibility. "Daniel, I didn't plan to tell you this like this," Emily began, her voice calm but measured. "But I am 7 months pregnant." The words landed in the room like a storm, breaking over still waters. Daniel's mind raced, thoughts colliding faster than he could process them. How had he not noticed? How had she kept it from him? And why, after everything? Was she sitting here now, asking him to face a truth he had never prepared for? He opened his mouth, then closed it, swallowing dryly. You're pregnant?" he finally managed, his voice a mixture of disbelief and awe. Emily nodded, her eyes steady, and Daniel felt his world shift on its axis again. Suddenly, the divorce papers, the anger, the fights, they all seemed trivial in the face of this revelation. All the resentment he had harbored, all the bitterness that had built up over months, dissolved into a strange, unexpected stillness. He had not expected this. Not now, not ever. Emily took a deep breath. "I didn't come here to fight, Daniel. I came because we need to finalize things, yes, but also because we need to figure out what comes next, for us, and for the baby." Her words were gentle, yet firm, carrying the weight of someone who had endured much and made peace with the reality she now faced alone. Daniel sank onto the chair opposite her, running a hand through his hair again, this time in sheer disbelief. He felt a tide of emotions, fear, joy, anxiety, hope, all swirling in a chaotic storm inside him. I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily gave a small, understanding smile, one that once would have melted his heart without a second thought. Now it was different. It was cautious, like she was testing the waters of a man she once loved and wanted to trust again. "Then don't say anything," she replied softly. "Just listen. Listen to me and try to understand." And so she told him everything. How she had discovered the pregnancy months ago, how she had wrestled with fear, uncertainty, and the knowledge that he might never forgive her. or even want to be a part of this. How she had hoped that the time apart would allow them both to think clearly, to decide what was truly important. Daniel listened, sometimes staring at her hands on her belly, sometimes at her face, trying to reconcile the past with the present, trying to make sense of the future that suddenly seemed both terrifying and full of possibility. When she finished, the room was silent except for the steady ticking of the clock. Daniel felt the weight of reality settle on him. He was about to become a father, whether he was ready or not. And in that moment he realized that all the arguments, all the pain, all the reasons for the divorce, they were insignificant compared to the life that now depended on him. The divorce papers lay on the coffee table, crisp and official, yet somehow meaningless in the face of what had just been revealed. Daniel stared at them, feeling the absurdity of it all. Just a few months ago, these papers would have seemed like the ultimate end, a final declaration that their marriage was over. Now they were just pieces of paper, dwarfed by the enormity of what awaited them. A child, a new beginning, and a chance to redefine the meaning of family. Emily watched him carefully, reading the conflict etched across his face. "You don't have to sign them today," she said gently, though her voice carried an unspoken hope. "We can take our time, figure out how we want to handle this, together." Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. He had imagined many scenarios, but none had prepared him for this. He had imagined anger, resentment, bitterness. But he had not imagined this sudden surge of protectiveness, of longing, of the fierce, undeniable love that still lingered beneath the layers of hurt and disappointment. He took a deep breath, his hands shaking slightly as he reached out and touched her belly. Emily's eyes softened at the contact, a small, almost imperceptible smile crossing her face. The movement was tentative at first, as if testing the waters, but soon he found himself leaning closer, feeling a connection that transcended months of silence and estrangement. I can't believe it," he whispered, voice choked with awe. "We're really going to have a baby?" Emily nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Yes, and I want you to be there. I want us to figure this out. Together." Daniel felt a swell of emotion. He couldn't name fear, excitement, a sense of responsibility, and an unexpected surge of hope. For the first time in months, he truly saw Emily, not as the woman he had fought with, not as the estranged partner he was losing, but as the mother of his child, the person who carried the most precious part of him. The anger he had held so tightly began to dissolve, replaced by an urgent, overwhelming desire to protect, to care, to be part of this new life. They spent hours talking, words flowing like a tentative bridge over the chasm of months spent apart. They discussed names, plans, and fears, but also dreams they had once shared, now tinged with the complexity of their new reality. Daniel realized that love did not always vanish with separation. Sometimes it waited patiently, hidden beneath layers of hurt, only to emerge stronger when confronted by the undeniable truth of what truly mattered. The apartment, once a place of tension and resentment, began to feel like a sanctuary again, a place where life, hope, and love could coexist despite the mistakes of the past. Emily laughed softly at something he said, and Daniel found himself laughing too, the sound filling the space with warmth he had thought lost forever. It was a small, fragile piece, but it was real, and it was theirs to nurture. As evening fell and the city lights twinkled outside, Daniel realized that nothing would ever be the same again. The divorce papers still lay on the table unsigned, but they no longer felt like the end. Instead, they were a reminder of how far they had come, how much they had endured, and how much they had yet to build. He reached for Emily's hand, holding it gently over her belly, and for the first time in a long time he felt ready to face the challenges, the joys, and the unknowns of parenthood, ready to let go of the past and embrace the future, however uncertain it might be. And as they sat together, hearts slowly reconciling with the reality of the life growing between them, Daniel knew that this unexpected twist, the secret she had carried, the child they would raise, was not the end of their story. It was, in fact, the beginning of something far greater, far deeper, and far more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. In the quiet of that living room, surrounded by the mundane and the extraordinary, they found a new understanding, a renewed commitment, not just to each other, but to the life that awaited them. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt hope, pure and undeniable, filled the space where fear and resentment had once lived.